Vasistha continued. Another of the Vipashchits who also attained the same state after wandering from continent to continent for a long time, and after reaching the infinite space of Brahma, in which he saw millions of universes. So the Vipashchits experienced everything there was to be experienced. They eventually die. Well, they died many times and got reborn many times. But they eventually died, these two Vipashchits eventually died, and had no notion about taking on another physical body. And so they were in their subtle body, and their attention wasn't getting distracted, it wasn't getting hijacked. This is possibly what we could call a yogic state. It's a higher state of consciousness. But they're not enlightened, because although their awareness is pure, they haven't seen through the illusory nature of ignorance. And that is to do with the direction of the attention. Their attention had become very still. But what are the options? The attention can be still, or the attention can be drawn to something. Both states are ignorance, perhaps different levels of ignorance, but they're not yet enlightened, because the attention has to pursue the third option, which is to come back to itself. And not just be still, but to rest in its own nature. So that's what happened to two of the Vipashchits. They ended up in the infinite space of the Creator. Let's find out what happened to another one. Yet another of the Vipashchits fell a victim to his own mental conditioning, and after renouncing his body, became a deer and lives on a mountain. Ram asked, Lord, when the vasana, the mental conditioning, of the king Vipashchit was but one, how did it become diverse, producing diverse results in the 4 Vipashchits? He was just the one king, but he split into 4. So his consciousness split into 4. And they all had different fates and realized different things. Vasistha replied, the vasana of beings becomes either dense or light by repeated exercise and repetition of its effects. It is also subject to the influence of time, place and activity. So it's to do with the habits that we adopt, and these habits are dependent on who we're with, where we are, and what circumstances we're subjected to. Certain habits get set up, and these are our vasanas, our mental conditioning. If it becomes light, it undergoes change into something else. If it is deep-rooted, it does not change. So the conditioning can be light or deep-rooted. On the one hand are the time, place and activity. On the other is the vasana itself. The two, the circumstances and your disposition, your vasana, act upon each other. Whichever be the stronger wins instantly. Thus, the 4 Vipashchits were drawn in different directions. Though they had the same vasana to start with them, 2 of them were caught in the net of ignorance, one was liberated, and the other became a deer. So it's all to do with circumstances and with your own habitual tendencies. Even now, the 2 who were caught up in the net of ignorance have been unable to find a way out. Ignorance is also infinite in a manner of speaking, because it has no real existence. However, if one develops the inner light and begins to examine it in that light, this ignorance vanishes in the twinkling of an eye. The Vipashchit who went from one country to another, from one world to another, saw an illusory creation. He saw an illusory world which in fact was Brahman only. He somehow came into contact with a holy man. With his help, Vipashchit realized the truth concerning the illusory perception of the world, and instantly realized the infinite consciousness or Brahman. At that very instant, his ignorance, as also his body, ceased to be. So that was the circumstance which can make a difference. It doesn't matter what your tendencies are. You'll remain in ignorance unless you find this teaching. It's an exceptional person that will stumble upon the truth and realize the nature of what they've stumbled upon by themselves. This is what's impressive about the story of the Buddha. But the society, the culture the Buddha lived in was clearly one which is susceptible to this expression of the truth. So the circumstances in the West, when you stumble upon the truth, the chances are you might be sectioned. So the circumstances are very, very important for your enlightenment or otherwise. Thus have I told you, O Ram, the story of Vipashchits. This ignorance too is infinite, even as Brahman is infinite, because the ignorance has no independent existence apart from Brahman. It's all just consciousness doing its thing. Consciousness, which is essentially pure, identifies with the notions which arise within it. These notions are obviously of the nature of consciousness too. It is the infinite consciousness alone that sees countless universes and worlds here and there, now and then. It's consciousness which creates all notions of past and future, of here and there. When this truth is not realized, it is known as ignorance. When this truth is realized, the very same consciousness is known as Brahman. This is when consciousness discovers its own nature once again. There is no division between the two, for the division is unreal ignorance, which in reality is Brahman. The division seems to arise in consciousness, and is therefore non-different from consciousness. Thus, Brahman alone is the world appearance, and the division is consciousness. There is nothing other than the ocean of Brahman.